In May 1945, the world celebrated the most destructive war in human history was over. The Grand Alliance of the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union had triumphed, but this unity was built on a shared hatred of a common enemy. With Hitler dead, that hatred had no place to go. The two emerging superpowers, the capitalist democracy of the United States and the communist dictatorship of the Soviet Union, were ideological polar opposites. The wartime marriage of convenience was over, and a bitter divorce was about to begin. Even before the war ended, the Allies had begun to fracture. At the Yalta Conference in February 1945, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin agreed to divide a defeated Germany into 4 occupation zones, but they couldn't agree on how to rebuild it. The new U.S. President, Harry Truman, arrived at the Potsdam Conference that July with a much harder line. Truman was already aware of Soviet unwillingness to permit free elections in Eastern Europe. At Potsdam, the clear division between the American desire to rebuild a stable Germany and Stalin's demand for crippling reparations set the pattern for all future conflict. The rhetoric of the new conflict was famously defined by a former British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. On March 5, 1946, speaking at a college in Fulton, Missouri, with President Truman by his side, Churchill warned the free world. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. His words drew a line through Europe, separating the democratic, capitalist West from the communist East, controlled by Moscow. The old alliance was no more. The United States responded to the Iron Curtain with 2 groundbreaking policies. The first was the Truman Doctrine of 1947, a pledge to provide economic and military aid to countries threatened by communist subversion. It was the official declaration of the policy of containment. This was quickly followed by the Marshall Plan, a massive $13 billion investment to rebuild the shattered economies of Western Europe, making them prosperous and resistant to the appeal of communism. The lines were drawn. Europe was now a chessboard. The first major test of this new policy came over the city of Berlin. Located deep inside the Soviet-occupied zone of Germany, the city itself was also divided between the 4 allies. In June 1948, the Western Allies introduced a new currency into their zones, including West Berlin. To Stalin, this was the final straw. On June 24, 1948, his forces cut all road, rail, and canal access to the city. Over 2 million West Berliners were trapped with only enough food and fuel for a few weeks. The United States and Britain refused to abandon the city. They didn't go to war, they took to the skies. The Berlin airlift, codenamed Operation Vittles, became one of the greatest humanitarian and logistical feats in history. For nearly a year, American and British planes took off and landed every few minutes, delivering thousands of tons of food, fuel, and medicine every single day. On May 12, 1949, Stalin admitted defeat and lifted the blockade. The West had won the first battle of the Cold War. The Berlin blockade created a new sense of urgency. In April 1949, the United States, Canada, and 10 Western European nations signed the North Atlantic Treaty, creating the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. For the first time in its history, the U.S. had entered into a permanent military alliance during peacetime. The treaty was based on the principle of collective security. An attack on one member was an attack on all. The Soviet Union would soon respond by creating its own rival military alliance, the Warsaw Pact. As a final, shocking punctuation mark to this tumultuous era, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb. On August 29, 1949, the DS-1, a near copy of the American Fat Man bomb, was successfully tested at a remote site in Kazakhstan. The U.S. monopoly on atomic terror was over. The world now faced a terrifying new reality: 2 ideologically opposed superpowers, each armed with weapons capable of ending civilization. The Cold War was now in full swing.